Hi, I'm Rose. I'm a grateful member of Al-Anon. Thank you, David, for the warm welcome. I am so happy to be here today. There is a lot more people than I was expecting for this early in the day. I feel so important. I've got all these microphones here in front of me. There's a video camera up there. It's wild. When I first came to Al-Anon, there used to be a gal that would introduce herself. She'd say her name, and she'd say, "I'm a grateful member of Al-Anon." And I used to think, my gosh, she must not be here for the same reason that I'm here, because I have a lot better things I could do with my time every week. And, I understand now why she was grateful. I hope by the end of my time talking to you guys, you'll understand why I'm grateful also. I met the alcoholic that I love 25 years ago. In fact, this time, 25 years ago, I was helping him graduate high school by taking his typing tests for him. We met my very first day of my freshman year in a typing class. He was a senior and needed to take that to graduate. And I thought, I'm going to help this guy because, we started dating by then, and I helped him quite well. I can look back now and see all these ways that I helped. I helped deny so many things, and I had no idea that alcohol had affected our lives. We got married as soon as I graduated high school. We had kids right away, and it wasn't until I came to this program that I realized throughout our years of growing our children how alcohol had really affected our lives. One way that it affected our lives was when our son was 3. We were leaving one evening, probably 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. We packed everybody up because we were going to go buy pot. I'm sure everybody packs up their kids to go buy pot at night. And we were arguing on our way out because he had drank a little bit and wanted to drive. And I thought, I haven't drank, why shouldn't I drive? And he won the argument, of course, because that's just how it worked in our house. And we were so distracted having this discussion that we didn't realize that our son didn't get into the car. And as we left our house, we ran over him in our driveway. He's good. He's a grown man these days. But we ran over his legs. He had 2 broken legs. He couldn't walk for several months until he healed, and he had to learn to walk again. I had no idea that that was a way that alcohol had affected our lives. I was clueless. It wasn't until I told this story to somebody in Al-Anon that she pointed out, alcohol has affected your life way before I even thought that it was a problem. And I'm so thankful to be able to see today how ill I had become, because it's only by recognizing how ill I had become that I'm able to start healing. It says in our Al-Anon readings, when we share a form of life with someone that has alcohol, we too become ill. In your book, it talks about how it affects all that touch it. The way that I became ill was I needed to be needed. I made sure that my husband needed me every single day. I got up early and made coffee and lunch and breakfast every day because I needed to know that he needed me. And I managed everything in our house. I never asked for help. I was very resentful because he couldn't read my mind. I thought that if I loved him enough, that he would be able to love me enough back. And that's what I thought he drank, because he didn't love me as much as I loved him. And, that was painful for a lot of years, running around thinking, gosh, if this person would just love me as much as I love them, we'd be okay. And he would stop drinking. And, the promises always, I remember every time I promised. It was just like Joe shared last night. If any of you didn't hear Joe last night, go get his CD, because he had such a great share. But from my side of that, every morning, I promise I'm not doing this again. And I would look in that man's eyes, and I knew that he meant it. And so I believed him, and I thought, okay, great, we're starting over. It's going to be we're going to have a great life now. And he drank that night. And I think, gosh, how do I miss this? I believed it every time. What I've learned now is he meant it every single time. He was just powerless to not do it. And I've learned that had nothing to do with me. It had nothing to do with the amount of love that he did or didn't have for me at that time. I had regrets when I finally came to Al-Anon that I hadn't come before. I came to Al-Anon after he went to treatment, and finally, I thought, gave me permission to go. He said, hey, they talk about this thing called Al-Anon. You should go to that. And I had looked into Al-Anon for a while before that. I thought that nobody in Al-Anon would understand what was happening in my house. I thought that people would say, you need to leave. You shouldn't put up with that. And I didn't want to leave, and so I didn't go. I was very afraid of what he would think or do if he knew how much my drinking bothered him. His drinking bothered me. I drink sometimes too. Can't beat him, join him. That didn't work out for me either. But you know, I didn't know how to handle saying, I'm uncomfortable here. And so he gave me permission when he was up at treatment, and so I went. And I went thinking that the people in those rooms would tell me how to keep him sober when he came home. They don't tell you that there. If you want to go to Al-Anon to learn how to get somebody sober, I'm sorry to tell you, that's not what they say. In fact, we do not talk about alcoholics in Al-Anon at all. We talk about ourselves and how crazy we have become. And I learned that there. And while I was really frustrated with that at first, because I wanted a formula. I wanted you to tell me that if I did A and B, I would get the result of C. And when I realized that wasn't what happened there, I regretted not going while he was still drinking. I thought, man, I could have really reacted differently. I could have been more loving. I could have set a better example for my children on tolerance. Probably 2 years after I'd been in the program, I had the opportunity to work my program with an active drinker. And at first, it was really tough. I was pissed. I did not realize how difficult it is to work your Al-Anon program when you have an active drinker in your home. We talk a lot in Al-Anon about minding our own business, about giving up the alcoholic to their own higher power. I knew all of those things in my mind, but putting them into play proved to be a bit more difficult than I had expected. Today, I am blessed that we had that experience because I can help other ladies that live with active drinking. And had I not had the experience of him drinking again, I wouldn't know how to work my program with an active drinker. And it remains one of the biggest blessings that we've had, which sounds kind of strange, but a relapse was a good thing for me. I learned to let go. I learned to accept him for where he was, and I learned that through the 11th step in the Big Book. I learned that I cannot have peace and let him do what he needs to do if I did not have conscious contact with my higher power. Until I did that, I was so in his business, and that is not a place that I enjoy being anymore. I enjoyed it for a long time. I felt super important. It was not good for me anymore, and I do find myself slipping in that today, but I do service work, and that is one way that I am able to mind my own business. So if there's anybody out there that is having trouble minding your own business and you're not in service, find service in your program. It has brought me so much serenity. I just can't even say enough about that. I also learned that he has his own higher power. His higher power is not me. I did not know that. I thought I was so important that everything that I said was the final word. I like to talk a lot. People kept saying or asking me if I was nervous to talk today. And I wouldn't have really called it nervousness. I don't know if you guys have a loved one that likes to talk and likes to talk about the same thing over and over and over again until their point is proved. That's how I do things. I get to talk up here and nobody interrupts me. It's really great. I can talk for as long as I want. You all are just going to have to sit there. That didn't happen in my house. We would talk and interrupt each other, and nobody was ever listening. I learned how to listen in these rooms. I learned how to be quiet. I learned how to not respond because it wasn't my turn to talk. And that I carry with me in all areas of my life today. I would say this program is not just to deal with a person that you love that has a problem with drinking. It is to deal with a person that has a problem with something that you don't like. And a lot of times those things that I don't like are perfectly fine. They're uncomfortable for me. I have found the courage to change in this program, just like it says in our Serenity Prayer, and I didn't know if I was going to have that courage. I was pretty comfortable where I was at. I didn't know that my comfortableness was not healthy. So I have learned that my husband's sobriety is not my badge to wear. I wore it for a long time. I like to think that he's sober because I have a hand in it, but I realize he's sober because of all of you. He's sober because he has a place to go that's safe, and he has a place where he's understood. And I didn't understand him. Just like in Al-Anon, everybody understands me there. I had no idea that I was not the only one that was living with all these things in my mind and just being so crazy and manipulating and just thinking that I was helping when I was really just hurting. So the reason that I came to Al-Anon was to get my alcoholic to stop drinking. The reason that I stay is because I have learned a way to live that is so much more peaceful and serene, and it just feels good. I love coming to these roundups. The recovery is so great here. It's just like I've got all these new friends now, and everybody smiles at you and hugs you. And that's what it's like when you walk in the rooms of Al-Anon. I believe that's what it's like when you walk into the rooms of AA too, is this warm welcome. And we have this reading that says, even though you may not like all of us, you'll love us in a special way, the same way we already love you. I didn't quite get that at first, but I love every single person that comes into Al-Anon because I appreciate where they're at, and I love them for all their hurts because they loved me when I came in. They loved me when I was self-righteous and when I was dominating and when I thought that I knew all the answers. Because I'm telling you what, I am a smart girl, and there is not much that I don't know. But it's really that there is a lot that I don't know. I just get so egotistical that I think that I already know it all. I've had a lot of challenges trying to figure out how do I change the way that I love people, because I can love them best by letting them go. And letting them go and letting God take care of them still can be very, very difficult for me. But I get a new chance at it every single day, and I'm super thankful for that. And I'm so excited to hear Amanda that I'm going to let Amanda talk now, because I think she's got a great thing to say. So thank you so much for having me here. James, thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
And I'm an alcoholic. I'm going to time myself because unlike Rose, I like to talk a lot. She's so sweet. She gave me a lot of time. So. Rose, thank you so much. I have so much respect for Al-Anon. Gosh, I have so much respect for Al-Anon. I've attended some Al-Anon meetings, and man, you guys helped me with a lot. So thank you so much. Welcome. How are you guys feeling? We're at Roundup. I'm so excited. So excited. Another year. It's our 44? Yes, there we go. 44th year. And welcome. If you're from out of town, welcome. We're so excited when I get excited when I see people coming from out of town. And our speaker last night was phenomenal, and I'm really excited to see the rest of them. Thank you so much, James, for asking me to be of service and step up and represent our local speaker. Man. So I have 13 years of sobriety. My sobriety date is December 7th of 2005. And yeah, crazy, right? 13 years. Thank you. I have a home group. My home group is Next Generation of Alcoholics Anonymous here in Grants Pass. It's on Sundays over at our High-Low Club. And I have a sponsor who I believe has a sponsor. And hopefully she's sitting out here. If you're new, and there she is, I see her waving. If you're new in here, welcome. If you're new and you're sitting at a conference with this many people, man, I remember that. So congratulations, you made it this far. It's a big deal. So it's tough for me to kind of figure out where I want to start sometimes. So I think I always go back to the book, right? So I'm going to start. There's a story in the back of the book that I read when I was in rehab. It was my first introduction to Alcoholics Anonymous was the big book. And I saw this story because the front of it looked like a textbook and I wasn't interested. And I was in rehab at the time. And so I saw these stories and I was like, cool, like a book. I can actually do something. So I opened it up and I read this. I came through the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous at age 17, a walking contradiction. On the outside, I was the portrait of a rebellious teenager with miles of attitude to spare. On the inside, I was suicidal, bloodied, and beaten. My stride spoke of a confidence I didn't feel. My dress was that of a street-tough kid you didn't want to mess with. Inside, I was trembling with fear that someone would see through my defenses to the real me. So I read this. I was 17 when I read that. And I thought, oh, okay, well, I get that. That made sense to me. It was the first thing that I had read that I had identified with. I was raised here. I've been here my whole life. We moved here from LA County, which sounds way fancier than it is. I was 2 months old when we moved here. So I was raised here, backwoods Grants Pass. And I was raised in poverty. I was raised in drug addiction. I was raised in trauma. My mother was a methamphetamine addict my entire childhood. And so if you're familiar with what methamphetamine looks like for the kids, that was my life. My father died when I was 13 of alcoholism, cirrhosis of the liver. He, at 11 years old, was in a coma from his alcoholism. And I remember going and seeing him and them telling me that he had a 20% chance to live and that I should say goodbye. And he pulled out of it, and he lived. And then when I was 13, they told him, they said, if you ever drink again, you're going to die. And he drank. He relapsed over a relationship. He stayed clean and sober for 2 years. He drank, and he was dead a couple days later. And so early on, I was 13 when he passed, and so early on I realized alcohol and drugs equal bad stuff. I knew. I had watched my mother, I'd watched my father, I'd watched all the people around. I knew. I was surrounded by drug addiction, alcoholism, and criminality. That was my entire life. So there's no question that this stuff causes consequences. However, of course, at 15 years old, it was expected in my family that I drank. It was weird if I didn't. It was against kind of the family culture. So I drank. Of course I drank, right? And for the first time that I really drank, I was drinking Everclear out of a big gulp cup with a little bit of ice. And my friends told me, you just drink it as fast as you can. And so I did, of course. And I quickly blacked out. I'm a blackout drinker from the gate. But there was this moment right before I blacked out that I felt it, and it hit me, and this wave came over me, and I fell in love. I fell in love. And I thought, and this is the last thought I remember thinking, why have I not been doing this every day since I was born? This is the answer to all the pain, all the insanity, all the trauma. This is the answer. Now I get why so many people do this. It just made sense to me. Why? It was like this perfect puzzle piece had finally clicked for me. So the rest of my time at that point was really spent getting drugs and alcohol, primarily alcohol. That was it. That was my focus. So I started out like that, blackout drinking. And there was never, ever in my entire time of drinking, there was never a question whether or not I should try to control it. That's not my story. It never occurred to me that I should. It never occurred to me that alcohol wasn't the answer. And through the next months and a few years, I accumulated charges as a minor, and they progressively got more severe, more intense. I was on probation. At 15 years old, at the end of my 15th, I ended up getting pregnant. I got pregnant the first time I had sex, so if you think that's a myth, it is not. And suddenly I'm pregnant, and I'm 15, and I'm living in all this insanity, and I need to drink. I already need it. I need it like I need to breathe. I remember that obsession, and the book talks about that obsession. And at all costs, I was gonna drink. I learned very quickly that a cute young girl can manipulate older men for money and drugs, so I took advantage of that. But now I'm pregnant, right? I'm pregnant. And I didn't want to raise a child in what I had been raised in, and I had this vague understanding that drinking while you're pregnant is pretty terrible. And so I stayed clean and sober through most of that pregnancy. I'd like to stand up here and say that I didn't drink and use while I was pregnant, and I was that girl that could do it. I'm not. I drank. It was Y2K. I mean, a glass of wine, right? The doctor said, which they didn't, but I told people that he did. And so I drank some wine. A lot of wine. That glass turned into a huge bottle of wine. I was pretty convinced, because I was 16, 15, that the world was going to end, Y2K for those that remember that, and I just thought, whatever, I'll just get drunk. And so I did, like any good alcoholic. Blacked out, of course. And so I had my son, and looked at this baby who's screaming and crying and needs diaper changing, and you got to do stuff with kids. They require stuff. And I don't know, I need to drink. And if you're crying, I need to drink because it's stressful. Everything about you, I need to drink. I'm obsessed with alcohol. And I'm no longer pregnant, so there's that little guilt that's gone now. I quickly decided that I was going to give him up for adoption because I didn't want to drag him through everything that I had experienced. And primarily, which is certainly more important, I need to drink. I need to drink, and you're in the way. So this wonderful family took him in, beautiful family, wanted me involved, wanted it to be open, wanted to support me, took him in, and that was awesome for me because they took care of him. And so I would see him like once every couple of months when the guilt got bad enough on my way to a party. And they took care of him, they raised him for the first 18 months of his life. So at the end of that, they said, hey, we want to adopt him. We don't want to just foster him, we want to adopt him. And I thought, that's probably best. I'm a terrible mother. Nobody taught me how to be a parent. I've been raised in addiction, so you should do that. And the time I was supposed to sign that paperwork, I blacked out for 3 days and never did it. So 17 years old rolls around. At this point, I'm looking at prison. They wanted to put me in prison for an assault to a police officer that I absolutely did when I was drunk. And they wanted to accumulate some charges. As a minor, it's a little different. And so they said, prison, you're looking at 3 to 5 years, or you can go to rehab. And there's a rehab here in Medford where moms can take their kids. And that was the only place available to me, so that's where they put me. And they had me take my son. And I remember being terrified again. And so I'm sitting in this rehab after I had to do a medical detox. I remember going through DTs. There were spiders on the walls. I was hallucinating people. There were shadows. And I finally get through my medical detox, and I'm in rehab, and I'm pretty disappointed that it's not looking like the Hilton or like 28 Days with Sandra Bullock, like that super nice place and horses or whatever. Pretty disappointed about that. I'm pretty sure I can't stay because of that. But I'm pretty sure also I don't want to go to prison, so I'm just going to stay for now, is what I had decided. And I remember when they told me prison or rehab, my very first thought was, I heard you could drink in prison. My first instinctual thought, how do I get the alcohol in prison? My second thought is, I don't want people to think I'm a bad mother because I chose alcohol in prison over my son. And my third thought is, I'm just going to do whatever they want me to do so they go away and I can do what I want. So that's what I came to Alcoholics Anonymous with at 17 years old. Alcoholism. I heard you could drink in prison. Manipulation. I'm going to do whatever you want so that I can get what I want. I was a mess. Man, I was a mess when I got here. I was traumatized. I was a kid. I was tiny. I was 17, trying to take care of a baby I didn't know anything about. And I go to my first meeting. It was the Hole in the Wall in Medford. And it's the biggest meeting in the valley. It's huge, and they have a microphone. And I'm arrogant, quite arrogant sometimes. And so I think, I want the microphone, and I need to tell you how to do this thing. My first meeting. And I couldn't wait. Like, it kept passing me. I'm like, I really want it. Like, and you know how in meetings you kind of feel bad for the guy who's like begging to speak? So they finally gave me the microphone, which, they regretted. And so I took that meeting hostage. It was my first opportunity to take a meeting, all of you guys hostage. And you loved it. I was convinced. They're loving this. Yeah. Amazing, right? I'm amazing. And so, it was terrible. I was 17. I was insane. And I'm alcoholic, and I'm insane. So that was my introduction to Alcoholics Anonymous. It was insane. And there was a lot of people that just kind of looked at me, and they gave me the look like, man, you're kind of crazy. And you guys didn't really know what to do with me because I'm so young. I'm so young, and I'm clearly traumatized. You could see that without talking to me. And it made some people uncomfortable. You guys didn't really know what to do with me. I'm covered in tattoos, and I'm 17, 18. I got this kid. And I get out of rehab, right? 2 days after rehab, and I meet the one that I was going to be with forever. And he also was in the adjoining rehab because that means he's healthy. And so we ride off into the sunset with our white picket fence and have another baby. It's my daughter. And at 19 years old, he had a daughter, I had a son, we had a kid together. I had 3 kids at 19 years old. I'm in AA, NA, I'm hanging out, I'm doing it, right? I'm going to meetings, and I have a sponsor, or 6, and I have service positions, or 6, and I'm doing 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3, every single time I have a new sponsor. And my sponsors would tell me, they would say, it's time for 4, step 4. And I would say, this just isn't working out. It's not you, it's me. I was like breaking up with them, and then I'd find another less healthy sponsor. Because the less healthy you are, the less likely you're going to ask me to do what I need to do. And at the end of that relationship, and first I need to say this, I took him hostage. When I saw the room full of men in that group, I went, you're the sickest guy, pretty sure you're mine. So I need to say that before I say this. That relationship turned into some pretty severe domestic violence, and I hadn't experienced that trauma yet. So I was a basket case. I was a basket case. And at the end of that, when he decided he didn't want me, regardless of how much I begged him, I relapsed. Why? Because he had become my higher power. Because I kept doing 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And so all those things that I really needed to look at that were driving my alcoholism, I didn't. Everything that the steps teach us, I didn't know. I didn't learn. So of course I relapsed. And then 3 days after him and I split up, that relapse was for 2 days. 3 days after him and I split up, I found my white knight, the guy that was going to save me and play daddy. And suddenly I was willing to stay sober again. My alcoholism, my recovery, everything was contingent on I don't want to feel. Still, at that point, I don't want to feel. I don't want to be present. And so I had just switched, right? I just switched. And when that isn't going to work, because no human power will, alcohol is always my go-to. Always. So when the white knight couldn't save me, despite us running away to join the circus that his family owned, swear to God, that's a true story. They were stationed at the time in Sacramento, and so he told them to wait a day before they moved on and that we would join them. I was going to be the mermaid in the glass bowl, I think, was the plan. So I packed up my whole apartment and my son and was like, yeah, like this is it. I'm crazy. Like this is crazy, but I'm about it. And I'm convincing people in Alcoholics Anonymous, I think I'm convincing people, that this is brilliant and this is going to work. This is the answer. And you guys gave me that look one more time, just shaking your head. Okay, we'll be here when you get back. You should probably consider the 12 steps. And off I went. I'm 20 years old at that point. So when that didn't work out, of course, my higher power's gone. What do I do now? I'm getting loaded. I came running home to mom with my kid in tow saying, please help me, please help me. And she can't help me because she's crazy pants too, And so one more time, I relapse. And then I do it again for 6 months. I find a bunch of higher powers, a bunch of people, because I'm convinced that the issue is I keep trying to get into a serious commitment. And so really the answer is just no serious commitments. And I'm trying to convince you guys of that as well. And you guys shake your head, suggest the 12 steps. We'll be here when you get back. Hopefully you don't die this time. I heard that. And so my last relapse was December 5th of 2005. One more time. And I don't remember a lot from that night, but I do know that 4 days later I was in the ER for a rape kit. I remember enough to know that that's what happened. And that's how I drank. And so for the first time, this last relapse, it was so God-given for me. And it seems odd maybe to say that, but I'm really grateful for my last relapse. I don't ever want to forget it. But I remember that moment that I finally got scared. I thought I was bulletproof. I thought that I was invincible and that I could beat alcoholism somehow. I believed I was an alcoholic, but I didn't think I was an alcoholic of your type. I thought somehow I had the trick. Somehow I could figure it out, and I can't. And that last relapse proved that. There was a lot from that last relapse that told me, you're an idiot, and you need to do the 12 Steps Alcoholics Anonymous because you're going to die. You're going to die. And so you guys at that point, a lot of the women were tired of me taking meetings hostage and trying to take their husbands hostage and trying to be insane. You guys were tired. Man, I was wrecking. This is a small community, and for me to go and just ransack the few 12-step meetings we had at the time, you guys were tired. You guys let me in, and you said, come sit down, and we're here for you, but don't talk because you have nothing to offer. And for the first time, I listened to that. I'm 21 years old, and scared, the obsession and the insanity that comes with alcoholism. I'm scared. And so finally, I decided to reach out and ask some lady to be my sponsor. This lady, one of the few that would talk to me, and she said, I don't want to sponsor you. She said, I'm not a good fit for you. I could clearly tell she did not like me much. And I'm pretty sure there was a husband involved in that issue. So I don't blame her. But at the time, I remember feeling super abandoned, like, well, I was right. All of you hate me, and this isn't the place for me. And there was these 3 women that saved my life that day. It was my first meeting back. These women saved my life. They pulled me up after the meeting, after I got my 24-hour chip, and they pulled me up outside the meeting, and they said, you're going to come to Thai barbecue with us. It's a restaurant here. You're going to come over to the restaurant with us. You're going to sit there, and you're going to listen. We don't want to hear what you have to say. You need to hear what we have to say. And I thought, God, that's pretty harsh. You guys are kind of mean. But there was that thing in my head that went, yeah, but if you don't, you might drink and die. I'm scared. And so I went, all right. And I went. They did not want me there. They were clearly only doing it out of obligation as an Alcoholics Anonymous member. That's it. And it was really obvious. And so I'm sitting there, and they're talking to me, and they did this thing that I'm so grateful for. They held this mirror up, metaphorically, right? They hold this mirror up to me, and they say, you're a terrible parent. People don't like you because you're not likable. You don't know how to be a friend. You're not a good AA member. You don't know how to reach out to newcomers. You don't know how to be of service. You're chaos and you're drama. And we are afraid that you're going to die in your addiction. We're afraid. We're afraid for you. We feel like we're watching you die. What do you want to do about it? And I had that moment that many of us have. And I realized I could get up and walk away. They weren't holding me there. I could get up, walk away. I had a dealer down the street. There was alcohol there. I could do that. I knew that. I had this moment of clarity where I realized what that road was going to look like. And then I realized at that moment I also had the opposite choice to stay and ask them what to do, and then do it. They said, you need to go home and pray. And I said, well, will you be my sponsor? I asked the other lady. She said, no, I'm not a good fit for you. She said, you need to figure it out. And I'm so grateful for that. I know that there are a lot of women in this program that are kind and compassionate, and in a moment's second will step up for sponsorship, even if they feel like they shouldn't. There's a lot of women in here, more than not. I'm so grateful that I had that group of women that were willing to be brutal with me. They did not love me to death, and I'm so grateful for that. So I left, I went home, and she told me, you need to pray tonight. And that was weird for me. But I remember that thing, if I don't do this, I might drink and die. And so I got home, and in my driveway, because I thought, well, I'm going to make it dramatic. Like, if there's something, you're going to hear me. And in my driveway, on my knees, this is my one swear word, one of them, by the way. I got on my knees and I said, all right, listen, fucker. You need to help me. And then I waited. And I'm frozen, like, all right, so where's the burning bush? Because I need one. And if there's no burning bush, then you must not exist. And I'm mad, and I go in the house. And that was how I started this road to recovery. Angry, traumatic, insane. And so I go to meetings. I go to a lot of meetings. Gosh, a lot of meetings. 2 or 3 a day. And I would go to, and remember, I'm 21, full of tattoos, right? A couple kids that I have no idea how to parent. And I'm going to these nooner meetings, and I don't know about if anybody's from out of the area, but in our area, the noon meetings are kind of the more traditional. You got like the old guys, at the time they were smoking, and like the old Fisher guys are talking about hunting out on the porch, and I'm going to these meetings, and I go to this meeting, and I look at this meeting, and I look, and all I see is an ocean of gray hair. An ocean of gray hair, and a sign. We have a sign that announces our bingo nights once a month that's always up. And so I see this ocean of gray hair, and there was a couple people that had oxygen at the time, and it's at the time our building was a little older, and it was dingy from like the years of cigarette smoke, and then bingo. I'm like, oh my God, like this is my life now. At 21 years old, this is my life. I'm playing bingo for the rest of my life. And of course I went, yeah, no, it's not happening. You have nothing that I want, nothing. And I stop and I look and I hear these old guys on the porch talking about alcoholism, talking about the obsession, talking about the allergy, talking about recovery, talking about how they stayed sober and the lengths that they went to drink and the lengths that they've gone to stay sober. And that I understood. The language of the heart, right? We have our own language here. And I heard Alcoholics Anonymous singing at me on that porch with these old crotchety dudes that are smoking cigars and cigarettes, talking about killing animals. And I heard Alcoholics Anonymous. And so I would like walk up to them and they would ask me, how you doing? And I would tell them, and they did not care, and they didn't get it. Most of what I was going through, they didn't understand. But their answer always was, keep coming back, girl. Keep coming back. Do the 12 steps. Find a sponsor. So there was this lady. She was very mean, this one. And she came up to me after a night meeting, and she handed me a big book. She handed me her phone number. She said, I'm going to be your sponsor. You need to read the doctor's opinion. You have 24 hours. If you don't call me tomorrow, I'm not going to work with you. And you should know that nobody really wants to work with you. So... yeah, she wasn't wrong. And I remember having that attitude, right? Like, don't you know who I am? Why are you talking to me like that, like, that's too much, 24 hours. And she saw that whole attitude ready to come up, and she stopped me. And she said, if you don't do this, you're probably going to drink and die. And she mirrored what I was already afraid of, and I went, okay, done. All right, let's do this. So I read it like an hour before I called her the next day. And I read it, and I meant it. Like, I really read it. I did the best I could to understand what I was reading. We talked about it. We met. She said, tomorrow you're going to meet me for coffee. We're going to go over steps 2 and 3. So I get to the coffee shop, and I sit down. And in my mind, a sponsor, remember those unhealthy sponsors, right? In my mind, a sponsor was somebody who co-signed all of my insane behavior and didn't push me to do better, and didn't certainly want to work the 12 steps. And so I sit down, and I tell her all this drama at the time that I felt was infinitely more important. And she timed me for 2 minutes, though I didn't realize that's what she was doing. And at 2 minutes, she stopped me and said, we're moving on. That's not important. And she sat there, and I thought for a second, well, I'm leaving. Like, you're mean, this lady. And she just looked at me. And I could see that look of like, what are you going to do? Are you going to step up, or are you going to run away again? And so I just glared at her, and I sat there, right? I was a child, like a child. I had this temper tantrum because she's trying to be honest with me and save my life. So we go over steps 2 and 3, and she was awesome, man, at the time. She said, is there something out there? Do you realize there's something out there and that you're not it? That there's a higher power and you're not it? And I said, yeah, and I meant that. She said, good, step 2's done. Step 3, move on. Step 3, make a decision to turn our will and our life over to power greater than ourselves. She said, do you believe that power greater than yourself is out there interested, even remotely, in what you're doing? And I said, yeah, I think that they have an interest in what's going on with me. She said, good, step 3 is done, move on. Steps 2 and 3 are much more complicated for those that may not know that yet, but at the time, that's what I needed. She said, step 4, and I froze. And I was thinking, maybe we need to break up again. Like, maybe it's time. It's been a while. Maybe it's time that we break up. And she just sat there and looked at me, and she crossed her arms. She would do that a lot. She would just cross her arms, and she'd sit back and look at me like, do it. Do it. And she would challenge me to be better. And so I decided to be better. And I said, all right. She said, you have 1 week. And she laid out the columns for me out of the book. This lady took me straight out of the book. She gave me the columns, and she said, here, do this. You have 1 week. She showed me what it was. She said, read this, read that, do this, do your 4th step. She said, if you don't have it done in 1 week, you can find another sponsor. And I just want to remind you, nobody really wants to work with you. I will have heard that sentence of nobody wanting to work with me for 4 years. And at the end of that, when I decided to buck anyway, she said, I want to remind you also that if you don't do this, you're probably going to drink and die. And I went, okay, done. Done. I'm scared. So I do my 4th step, and I think I have a bunch of important stuff. I'm sure that some of you guys can relate to that in your first 4th step. And I think everything is so infinitely important, right? I have 9 pages front and back of all this really important stuff. And she says, okay, are you done? Did you do everything to the best of your ability? And I really did. I put everything I could possibly think of that I thought at that time was supposed to be in a 4th step. I put every single thing in there. I did everything I could. And here's why I did that, is because you guys kept telling me, if you do the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, you have a pretty good shot at staying sober. You didn't guarantee it, but you said you have a pretty good shot. If you do it to the best of your ability, don't give us 95%, don't give us 5%, do it 100% to the best of your ability, and you got a shot. And so I decided, I'm going to do the 12 steps to the best of my ability 100% so that when it doesn't work, I can tell you guys all that you were wrong and that I'm the one that really doesn't need the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm insane. I'm insane, right? Insane. However, what that gave me is an opportunity to 12 steps 100%. So I get into step 4, I do all step 4. She says it's time to meet and do step 5. And this is when I realized this is really what I'm afraid of. I wasn't afraid of the 4th step. The 4th step's just a list. You guys know what's on your 4th step. Writing it down doesn't change what you already know. It's just a list. 5th step is where I have to share that, right? And I thought, is it really that important? Is this really something I want to do? So I meet her at the park, and she's ready, and I'm like walking as if I'm walking to my death, slowly. And any minute, I'm thinking I can turn around. And somehow I made it to the bench that she was waiting for me at. So I sit down, and I tell her all this stuff. She looks quite bored halfway through. And it's very important to me, I think. And at the end of it, this is the important part for me. At the end of it, she looks at me, and she says, what's the thing that you're going to take to the grave with you? This is my next swear word. And I thought in my head, this bitch is magic. Magic. I am absolutely convinced at that point that she is a magician who can read minds. Because that was the thing, right? We all have 1, 2, 3 things that we think that we're going to take to the grave with us. And she saw the look on my face, and she said, if you don't talk about that, if you don't write that down and let us talk about it, that's what's going to take you out. And if you don't do this, you're probably going to drink and die. Okay, done. So I tell her the thing that I thought, was so terrible. And it wasn't as terrible, I see now, but there was relief in having one person know every single thing about me. One person. If you put 10 people in a room, they would know most things about me. But at that point, there was one person on the planet that knew every single thing about me that I was afraid to talk about. Every single thing. All the shadow self stuff. And she looked at me and she said, why do you think you're an alcoholic? And I said, well, I've gone through all this trauma, and I'm a survivor of sexual trauma, and I'm a survivor of physical trauma, and a survivor of neglect, severe neglect, all this stuff, tweaker mom, alcoholic dad, all this stuff. I'm listing, right? I mean, it reads like a Lifetime movie, right? And she sits back, crosses her arms, and I'm getting to know at that point that this is her stance of you're about to be lectured. And so I just dig in because, whatever. I'm going to be here a while. But I'm listening. And she said, that's not why you're an alcoholic. And she laughed at me, and she said, that's why you're dysfunctional. She said, you're very dysfunctional, but that's not why you're an alcoholic. And I remember being offended because that was a part of my identity. And she says, not why you're an alcoholic, girl. You're an alcoholic because you have an obsession and an allergy. And she got back into the book, into the doctor's opinion, back into the book, into how it works, and she talked to me about alcoholism. And she told me this story that somebody had told her. She said that there's a difference for her. She said that there's a difference between a social user, social drinker. Social drinkers have a minor consequence, they stop. They know that they're done. When they're feeling a little tipsy and they know they have to drive, they stop. And then there's the heavy drinker She said for her, the heavy drinker is somebody who gets some serious consequences, maybe a couple DUIs, maybe child welfare gets involved, maybe they get divorced. And when those serious consequences happen, they stop. It pushes them into recovery. And then there's the alcoholic, the insane, psychopathic alcoholic, who when we see that line that says these consequences are serious, we drink anyway. In the face of every reason why we shouldn't, we choose to drink anyway. At 17 years old, my liver was shutting down from late-stage alcoholism. I had bruises up and down my arms because I would pinch myself to keep the first drink in the morning down. My day depended on whether that first drink would stay down. I was prostituting, I was stripping, I was a victim of sexual trafficking, and I loved all of that part of my life because I was able to drink. At all cost, I will drink. She said, that is why you're an alcoholic, not because you're dysfunctional. And that hit me pretty hard. My fifth step was pretty significant because of that moment. I had heard at the fifth step that people would have these burning bush moments, right? I would hear that, and that didn't happen for me in the fifth step necessarily. It was pretty significant, but it wasn't huge in the way I had thought it would be. So we move on to 6 and 7. We breezed right by that, just like our speaker last night talked about. I didn't get it. I didn't understand about humility. I didn't understand about character defects and how to work on those. I didn't understand about my character, my being humble, having integrity. I didn't get any of that. At the time, I thought I did, and she did her best. Bless her. And so I get to 8 and 9. She tells me to write that list again, and I write a list of my amends. And she tells me, she says, the ninth step isn't just about saying that you apologize and that you're sorry for what you've done. The ninth step is also about thanking the people that killed themselves to try to save you. Tell people thank you. Acknowledge the work that people put in to get you where you're at. And so I had a long, long list. And I made those 9-step amends. And in the middle of my 9-step amends, my world changed. And in the middle of my 9-step amends, I went from a visitor to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous to a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I bought in, finally. Because everything changed for me. I had this moment, I'm making amends to the white knight guy, right? The white knight. Making amends to him, and I realized in that moment that I'm no longer a victim. And I thought I had been a victim since I was a toddler. And for that moment, I realized that I was a survivor. And the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, specifically step 9, allowed me to go from victim to survivor. And for somebody that had been in the environments that I had been in, that was more significant of a gift than anything you could have given me. And I bought in. I was on fire. I had like 9 months. I was on fire for Alcoholics Anonymous. On fire. And for those that have been there, when you realize this is going to save your life and it's going to be amazing, instead of this is going to save your life and you're going to have to play bingo for the rest of your life, that's a phenomenal moment, right? Phenomenal moment. I got hooked up with YPA. For those that don't know, young people in Alcoholics Anonymous. My first YPA conference is a conference like this, except a lot more Red Bull and sex, out in Seattle. I have not really been out of Grants Pass at that point, and went to Seattle, and that was insane. But what it did tell me, what it showed me, is that I could be 21 and sober at the same time. Because I was surrounded by people that were 40 years old and older. They had had houses and cars and wives and husbands and kids gone older, like in college. I had none of that. I had nothing even remotely close. So it was hard for me to relate. And then, so I'm around these other alcoholics, some of them younger than me, that knew the book better than me, talking about recovery, talking about Alcoholics Anonymous. And I realized in that moment that I could be 21 and sober at the same time. It was pretty significant. I stayed involved in YPA for 10 years. I grew up in young people in Alcoholics Anonymous and those Red Bull crazed conferences that we take over hotels. And for those that are familiar with YPA, I know some people, some of the traditional members tend to lose patience with us sometimes. Be patient. What YPA did for me is convince me that I needed to be in Alcoholics Anonymous. Because when I got here, 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21 years old, one of the things I heard more than anything else is, you're too young to be an alcoholic. I spilt more beer than you drank. And that may sound trite, but I promise you I heard that a lot. A lot. I wish I'd have gotten it when I was your age. I heard that too. And I know that people that say that mean well, but all I heard is you're less of an alcoholic than I am. I put in more time as an alcoholic than you, so therefore I deserve more. And so I really wanted to believe you. I really wanted to believe that I didn't have to sit and play bingo for the rest of my life. I wanted to believe that. So when you told me I'm too young to be an alcoholic, I really tried to prove you right. So when I came back and I was able to engage with other young people in the program, it was pretty significant for me. And I found my spot. This is my spot in Alcoholics Anonymous. I did step 9, finished step 9. Step 10, at that point I was already doing kind of 1 through 9 every day. So step 10 wasn't too difficult for me. Continue to take inventory, do spot checks, do amends immediately when I need to. And step 11 was amazing for me. Step 11, improving my conscious contact with my higher power. At that point I had found a conscious contact, and step 11 provided me an opportunity to make that amazing. And me and my higher power, man, we're homies, my higher power and I. And it works for me. It works for me. And step 12, my sponsor, once I got to step 12, my sponsor, that mean lady, she said, "You're done, go find a sponsee." And I thought, yes, nice. I get to go tell people what to do now, right? Because she had been my example, right? And so I found this crazy, crazy newcomer. And I said, "I'm going to be your sponsor." Like I'm trying to be her. I'm going to be your sponsor. You had 24 hours to read the doctor's opinion. And she dropped the book. And she said, "I'm not going to read that." And I thought, oh my God, what if she doesn't like me? Okay, don't worry about it. It's okay, you don't have to read it. We'll just meet tomorrow. It's fine. And I'm looking around because I know my sponsor was at that meeting, like making sure she didn't hear that. And we meet. And here's the thing I got out of working with my first sponsee. She didn't stay sober. I think she had like 2 weeks and she bounced. And here's what I learned is I was at a meeting and I'm talking to her and I'm telling her all this. She's tons of drama. We are when we're new. And she's telling me about all her drama, and I'm telling her about all mine, and talking to her about what she needs to do. And my sponsor was standing behind me, and she's listening, and she stops me, and she said, "What are you doing?" Right in front of her. She says, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm carrying the message of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I got the book in my hand, and I'm doing stuff, right?" And she says, "You're not carrying the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. You're carrying your message, and it's a mess. That is not the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. Stop it." She ended up relapsing, I'm sure, probably the next day, but which had nothing to do with me, I know now, but I remember being devastated. But it was a really valuable lesson for me moving forward and working with my sponsees in the future, knowing that it isn't about what I think, it's about what the book says, it's about what Alcoholics Anonymous message is. It's none of my business what they're doing. If they want me to talk to them about my experience, I'm happy to do so. So that was pretty significant. In that first couple of years, she was pretty amazing for me. I would call her with all my drama. She told me to call her every day, so I called her every day, sometimes 2, 3, 5 times a day sometimes. And I would tell her all this stuff that was super important, and she would time me for 2 minutes, and I learned. And I'm telling her all this chaos, and she'd hang up on me. And so I would call her back sometimes because I would think, maybe she just didn't hear it right. Maybe if I just said it differently. And so I'd call her, and she'd answer, and she'd listen for about a couple minutes, and then she'd hang up on me. What that taught me is that when she didn't hang up on me, it was legitimate crisis. And so she taught me the difference between drama and crisis. And I didn't know that at the time. And so it was pretty significant for me, a great lesson. Unfortunately, she relapsed when I had 4 years, and she didn't make it back. And a couple years ago, she shot herself in the head. And I say that partially because I think it's important to understand that nobody's exempt. No matter how amazing we are in this program, nobody's exempt. She was a pillar in the program here. Everybody knew her. She was involved in service. She was amazing. Big book, everything. And she relapsed. Her legacy is not her relapse. Her legacy is the people that she helped in Alcoholics Anonymous. To this day, I still talk about how much she saved my life. She did not care how young I was. She did not care how traumatized I was. She didn't care about any of that. And a lot of you guys did because you're so nice. She loved me enough not to love me to death. She didn't care if she hurt my feelings, and I needed that. So I got 4, 5, 6 years in, man, life's happening. Life's happening. And at one point, I ended up with this amazing man, and we were trying to be president and Mrs. President of Alcoholics Anonymous. Pretty sure I won the race, just saying. And it was a beautiful experience that taught me a lot. Taught me a lot of what I needed to work on. Relationships, right? I still have all that dysfunction. And it didn't go away just because I got sober. It did get a little bit better as I did the 12 steps to Alcoholics Anonymous, but it didn't go away. And so at 9 years of sobriety, through all the wreckage I had created with him, with her, identifies bisexual, and I had been with a woman for 7 years, all the wreckage had hit me finally. And I made some decisions in my career at the time. You guys allowed me to build a career. You guys allowed me to be productive. I had a beautiful home. I had a nice car. I had my kids. I'm raising my kids. They're great humans. Amazingly, you guys raised my kids. And at 9 years of sobriety, I made some decisions in my career that ended my career. And I deserved that. I thought I was never going to be able to practice again. I shouldn't have been able to. And when I lost the career, I lost the house because I couldn't pay for the house. And when I lost the house, I lost the kids because I couldn't house the kids. And I'm terrified. And then the obsession hits me. I'm not working steps. I'm barely going to meetings, and when I am, it's because I'm trying to do something dramatic and chaotic. And the obsession comes back. And if you have not experienced in recovery the obsession to drink, when you've had some solid recovery behind you, I don't wish that on any of us. That kind of insanity. And for 2 months, I wanted to drink every single day. But what I will tell you is that my home group, whom I had been very involved in my entire sobriety, saved my life at that time. When I decided to give up, and I'm sitting on my bathroom floor like, this is where I'm going to die. This is it. In that moment, my home group members showed up. And one of them many of them are in this room, and one of them came into my house. I'm depressed. I'm 9 years of sobriety. I'm depressed. I'm not taking care of my kids. I'm losing the house. He came in, he brought me food one day. He said, let's go to a meeting. And I realized in that moment how broken I was in recovery, in sobriety. And it started this new journey for me. And I went back to my home group and spewed a bunch of insanity at meeting level that they tolerated most of the time. It was pretty nuts for me. It was pretty insane. And in that, I ended up in another relationship, of course, right, higher power. And that relationship ended up being domestically violent. Because that's what I do. That's where I go because I'm dysfunctional. And my home group walked me through that too. They were kind, they were amazing, they were honest, and they were patient. You guys were all patient with me. And so 10 years of sobriety comes around, 11 years of sobriety comes around. I'm not working anymore. I'm not in my field of choice where my skills are at. And I'm part of Roundup. And I had to chair in the middle of that. I was chair of Roundup that year. I was a basket case, and all I could really do was just show up to the business meetings and run the business meetings. And you guys were pretty amazing with me. And so you guys told me, do the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And so I did. I found another sponsor who has so much grace, it's unbelievable. And sometimes we say, find somebody that has something you want. She's got what I want. She's kind and compassionate and has so much grace. And she's been amazing for this healing time in me. And so I get back into the 12 steps, and I go back to meetings, and I get back into service, and I do all the things that we tell people to do in the first 30 days, right? And I do that. And so I decide I'm going to appeal to the ethics board and try to get my career back. I didn't have a shot, but you guys told me to show up, and so I did. And in that roundup that I was chairing that year, I got an email in the middle, I think it was at this meeting, in fact, I got an email that said, we're going to grant your right to practice back. And I realized one more time the power of Alcoholics Anonymous. So I get to practice now, and my life's amazing. My life's amazing. That boy that I should never have been able to parent effectively, that you guys raised for me, is sitting in this room. He's 18 years old, ready to graduate high school, works. He's super responsible, and it's very bizarre how healthy my children are. My daughter can spit the big book. She's sitting in this room too, 15 years old. They're amazing human beings that reflect what you guys taught me. They are products of Alcoholics Anonymous. They're raised under the tables, and I am proud of who they have become. And you guys get the credit for that. You guys raised me in Alcoholics Anonymous. I was a traumatized child, and today I sit in front of you, a successful member of society. I have a great career that I get to rub elbows with cops and judges and lawyers and counselors, and that's weird, but amazing at the same time, because this is not supposed to be my story. I'm a gutter rat kid from Grants Pass, Oregon. My story was supposed to be to stay a gutter rat kid in Grants Pass, Oregon. Generational trauma, generational drug addiction, that was supposed to be my story. And you guys took that person and turned her into an amazing human being. I love my life. I love my life today, and it is not always easy. But I'm sober, and I'm not going to drink and die today. So thank you so much.